right. I think we are live. 1 second. Perfect. I'm just gonna mute this. Welcome to The World and the Sun, Syllable Studios official podcast where we talk to our writers, we also talk to our artists, and we also invite guests who are from the publishing world, the entertainment world, and all good stuff around storytelling and communication. We have here the writers of the upcoming collaborative world-building novel called The Artifact Rebellion. It's from the fantasy world, FAIA. And we have two of the creators here, Paulette and Kaylee. And Cameron was one of the writers. I myself was too. And Tim Malachi also will be joining us in a second. First, I just wanted to open the floor. How does it feel? You, either from the creator's perspective, the contributor's perspective, you build a world. We collectively wrote in that world. And then now we have a collaborative novel that is going to be published. How did it feel for you to write with other people and community? Were there challenges, were there opportunities? And feel free to introduce yourself too.
Well, I'll jump in. I'm Kaylee and I'm in Tasmania, Australia. I write mostly YA fantasy. Yeah, and together with Paulette and in the early stages, another writer, Leander Burrows, we started off the process of creating the FAIA world, I guess. But yeah, obviously a lot of the stuff came out of the writing, and yeah, that was one of the most exciting things for me. And at the moment I feel pretty excited about it all. I think I might be the only one who's seen like the print version of the book, and yeah, that was a very exciting moment because yeah, I think it's turned out quite well, and yeah, we all put a lot of work into it. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Paulinette or Cameron, do you want to say something? Thank you, Kaylee.
Well, what was the question again?
An introduction, and also how was it to write with other writers in a world that you created and you invited others to imagine and kind of perceive your world that you had created. How was that process for you, as opposed to kind of writing by yourself and also having something being published?
Well, my name is Paulinette. I'm the second co-founder of FAIA. The experience was exciting because it's the first time I built a world outside of my hobbies, so building worlds. I already had experience writing with other writers with the previous program, One Humanity. So it was simply like writing with a fellow friend. Exciting. And about the publishing, well, I can't wait for the day to arrive.
Super. Thank you. Cameron?
I'm Cameron, and I am from Maryland in the United States. As far as like working on FAIA, I'm one of the writers, and I later became, I guess, semi-story developer on behalf of Paulinette and Kaylee, and I really enjoyed it. I think this was my second time working on a pens down, developing and writing stories for a world. And I found it really inspirational. I didn't feel so alone while working on the story, and loved the fact that I could just bounce out ideas off of Kaylee and Paulinette and that they loved them. And it got me more gravitated to the world. I guess what really made me want to get into FAIA was the fantasy aspect and the fact that it took place in this huge city. When Kaylee showed me pictures of when Kaylee presented the world at first, I was blown away by it and all the characters. And I was like, I got to work on this. And it gave me a lot of fantasy vibes that I wanted to get involved with and add some of my own flavor of fantasy in it. And she, right, her and Paulette gratefully let me do that. So I appreciate it and hope that we continue working on this open world and expand on the stories and the characters that we all created and to help develop.
Super. What excites you about the fantasy? Like you talked about fantasy vibes. What is good fantasy to you? And how does it show up in that world, would you say? At least like what are some of your inspirations around fantasy? How do you see fantasy? What are those vibes? A little bit.
The society aspect of it was what really got me into it. I liked the fact that it was a matriarchal society and that there was a dynamic and that there were so many different layers to add into that dynamic. So when she told me that it was a fantasy techno like it was high tech city, that was a very advanced city run on magic and run by magical artifacts, that just let my mind explore different avenues of what that city would look like, the dynamics between the government and the pirates who have to go out and get the magical artifacts and bring back to the city, and the city who takes the magical artifacts and decides what they do with them and how it powers a city. So it really made me want to think about, okay, well, how does that look like from the perspective of, government protocol, and how does that conflict with the pirates organization? The pirates are more free and go out and do what they want to do. They really don't have any rules. So how would that conflict with each other? And how are these factions impacted by the retrieving and the giving back, and who's benefiting from it? So it kind of made me really want to understand that a little bit more, and also understand like what is the difference between women running government and the people that are left out, and how many and if the people who are just left out are just men. It's not. And there's so many different aspects to it that I just wanted to get more into and just understand it from a different perspective. If it's far away from our world, I kind of want to understand more about it through fantasy. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of research out there. I think the most famous one is like Tolkien has been like the grandfather of at least a particular flavor of fantasy, on the power of fantasy to kind of show us possible realities that we might not even be familiar with. And I think this process of active and imagining of what societies and structures and people and history can be seen differently, I think is such a powerful way to do it. I'm intrigued to hear from Kaylee or Paulinette, like any response from Cameron, and also in around the question, what was like the type of fantasy that you see in FAIA? What excites you about it, and what excites you generally about fantasy? Paulinette.
Honestly, tell you the truth, this is the first time I wrote about fantasy, because I'm not into the known fantasy, like includes elves, that sort of fantasy. I don't like it. I always run from it. I lean more into the science fiction and urban fantasy that includes supernatural creatures. So I'm kind of surprised that I wrote these characters in such a steampunk-like world. And so it's exciting because it's the first time that I leave my safe comfort with the science fiction. And I can't wait to keep exploring Angelina and Rishi's history together. So that's my intake of fantasy. I'm not into fantasy that much. I don't know. Elves scares me. I don't know.
Yeah, and for Paulinette's first time entering into the fantasy world of FAIA for her first writing project, she did a really good job. I was really inspired a lot from Kaylee's work and Paulinette. So when they came out with their stuff, I would read it and I was just blown away by the characters, and I was like, I have to get a character in here to interact with them. So that's what kind of got me more inspired to get involved with FAIA. It was the way they wrote it. It was kind of the fantasy vibe that really attracted me. Was a sophisticated. It was the fantasy world of FAIA was a very sophisticated to me, and I just really wanted to delve into it more and see that sophistication come to a head, come to its own life. And I feel like Kaylee and Paulinette really set the foundations for FAIA and how it was going to be.
Thank you. Kaylee, any response around fantasy, mixed good fantasy? What did you like about the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, Yeah, thanks to Cameron for those comments. It was very interesting to hear some of that stuff. And yeah, and thanks for putting in that point about coming to it fairly new. I mean, for me, it's always just been fantasy that I like most. And I think that's because to us, in my case anyway, I see to more of an extent than other genres, you can kind of do what you want. So like you can, the possibilities are like, they seem broader to me, which, may not be the case for everyone, but that's just how it seems to me. So yeah, so I just enjoyed how, when we were initially coming up with the world, Paulinette was like, I want something like this. And we were like, okay, well, how about that? And how about that? And, we could just decide whatever we wanted, essentially. So yeah, so that's what I found great about it. Yeah, was there more to that question?
No, I think that's fantastic. I would love to hear from Tim. And thanks for joining us. I'm wondering, like, one of the first questions we asked was like, how was the process writing with others, writing in someone else's world and being in community? And secondly, we kind of went to the direction around fantasy. What is good fantasy? What did you like around the fantasy and FAIA? Um,
Cool. Yeah. It's I think the pens down in general is really exciting because it kind of introduces stuff that I know I wouldn't have come up with on my own, and then it challenges my abilities to create in that space and kind of take it in directions that I wouldn't have taken it otherwise on my left to my own devices. Like the whole magic and technology thing. When I first heard that, I'm like, okay, that's like kind of weird. And then pirates, I'm like, what? What is this? So yeah, it all kind of struck me as like, wow, well, I'm not sure what to make of that. But then, like it's like getting out of your own comfort zone, and so that it ended up being like really like I came up with characters and situations that I never would have come up with otherwise, and it was really cool. It was a huge amount of fun actually. Yeah, totally. And this FAIA was great, but just in general, the whole pens down process is really pretty exciting stuff for sure.
You're on mute, Fabrice.
You're mute. That's like the 20, was it the pandemic's words of the year? Um, I do want to say, like, for the viewers that are listening now or will listen in the future, Pins Down is like Syllable's like official world building workshop, and we like a creator proposes a world, and then for 3 months we write together in that world, and that creator leads us into different prompts and iterations that leads into a manuscript that is worked on, and then that we publish to Syllable Books or other means. So just wanted to give that background. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like the FAIA world is very rich, and the way that it has like just I like pirates. Pirates are always super cool. The idea of like a women led government also that has like some problematic things around the artifacts, and then the artifacts wanting to be like to advocate for their own like wills as people. I think that's such an interesting dynamic. Like, can you tell me of a part in the story that really stuck out to you, that you feel like readers might enjoy, but without giving too much away?
Right. You know what? I'm gonna defer to Cameron on this because he was much more involved in the overall project. All right. Can I defer to you, Cameron?
Sure. I think what really got me into it was the fact that they decided to have magical artifacts and they have a consciousness of their own. And so that kind of got me into this spiraling thinking of trying to figure out, well, if they have this if they have this conscious, if these magical artifacts have these consciousness of their own, what does that look like? How long has this been? Why did that happen? When did this start happening? Um, yeah, I just got really into it. The fact that it was magic. I like the fact, well, where Tim was talking about, magic and technology, he couldn't concepted. I've always been interested in that magic versus technology, or magic and technology put together, and to see what that looks like. And FAIA was that world for me. So I was able to start thinking, how is this more, what's more technological and what's more magical, and how does that combine, and what does that look like? And it just gave me that imagination, that playground to start seeing where I can go with it, and just to see how the dynamic works in the world. And the fact that there were all types of fantasy races, a plethora of a plethora of melting pot of different fantasy races in one city, and how did that look like as well? So
What's
yeah,
what's the difference? Thank you. What's the difference, would you say, when you're writing? Like, and I want to shift a little bit into that, because I want to get a little to the viewers to kind of see the process of the collaboration. But like, what's the process for you when you're writing your own stories versus like a world that someone creates and then you co-create with them in that world? Do you feel like, or like, besides benefits, is there tensions that was maybe overwhelming for you, or that happened? I don't know, or maybe not. I don't know.
for me at least, the difference between writing for myself and then writing for other people is like there's more of a collaborative effort. I feel more overwhelmed working on stuff by myself. I mean, I had the playground, but at the same time, I have to deal with all the repercussions and the fallouts that come with that playground. I'm pretty much playing by myself and no one else. And after a while, that can get kind of tiring. But when you're playing on a playground with other people, such as FAIA, you can bounce off ideas. If you're not sure about something, you can always go. I never really felt like there was a tension. I knew from the beginning, like the boundaries that were set for this world, and what I didn't want, like what they didn't want crossed, I didn't want crossed. So I kind of went off of that. I was like, okay, I want this to be the best fantasy world it can be in their minds and in their realm of what they want FAIA to be. And so I wanted that too. So I guess our goals were aligned in that situation. I think that's the importance of finding stuff that you find in common with other writers, or that you're passionate about. Kaylee and Paulette, both of them. Paulette does urban fantasy, Kaylee does fantasy in general, and I do fantasy. So I was like, okay, I'll work with them more on learning this and figuring out, bouncing ideas off of them and seeing what they think about it. And I felt more at home doing it. So yeah.
Yeah, I really like that we're all different genre of writing. Like, I love sci-fi, I love supernatural horror, and then urban fantasy, more like speculative fiction things. What about I'm intrigued. I want to hear from Kaylee or Paulinette, and around like when you first designed the world, like what kind of frameworks kind of went into that thinking for you? What inspired you to to create that world?
Oh, well, if I go, I'm going to say it was like, it wasn't, I didn't think so hard about it. Like, maybe Paulinette was thinking harder, but like, I was just like, this would be cool and that'd be cool. And like, how do we put these things together? And I mean, I wanted to leave it as much as possible open-ended in terms of like, so when, Tim and Cameron and Euphorice came in and were trying to write in it, that it wasn't like so, constricted that there was nothing you could do. So it was like, okay, well, if we have lots of magical creatures, then people can be like, oh, I'm more interested in that, or I'm more interested in that. And they can like create a little like corner of the city or corner of the world for themselves and that kind of particular thing that they wanted to follow. So yeah, that was my thinking anyway. So yeah, it was kind of being broad, but then I guess having a few like key kind of things like the magical artifacts that people could kind of hang off to show that it is, like this kind of same world. But yeah, still they can kind of do their own thing with it. That was how I tried to conceive of it anyway. Don't know, Paulinette, jump in.
Yeah, that's true. I'll be the one seeking out the detail, like certain animals will symbolize this thing, this, that. I'll be literally like, okay, this person can have this because of her personality, hobbies, and Kaylee was like, okay, but remember, it's for 3 months. Don't expand. And I think the reason we wrote FAIA like this is because we wanted to see a world dominated by female characters, since most fantasy worlds are meant for male audience. So we wanted to see something for the females. Kind of like getting out of the same old. But yeah, Kaylee was more relaxed, but I was like fixing details like, no, this animal should go to this character because it represents this character. No, we should add this, the hobby, to make them more personality. And then like, probably it's for 3 months. It's not a novel. So yeah, but it was fun, the world. I love it.
No, I love that. I love the protest aspect of like, this is the world that we want to see, is a world led by women. Because I know patriarchy has for sure been destructive in so many manners and how we see ourselves as humans. Thank you. Tim, what about you? You said that this process forced you to write and create things that you wouldn't otherwise create. Like, what surprised you about that, I guess, in terms of your own, and then also what's the genre that you usually write as a writer?
That's really good. I just want to give Kaylee and Paulette some props for doing all the heavy lifting. You know what I mean? Because when I get caught in my own head and I gotta set out the rules and as Paulette was mentioning, like have to all this like work that's done. And with them, I was like, okay, well, that's the way it is. Then I just got to work with that. So and if it doesn't make sense, well, that's not my fault. That's their fault. So that's all right. So it was very freeing. It's very liberating. So yeah, I tend to do more of like a high fantasy with always kind of like a Western flair or something like that, kind of along those lines. But yeah, it was totally and like I think as Kaylee was just mentioning, we were kind of given our space to kind of create, here's the big picture, and then you can create your own world within that, and I kind of took that and ran with it. So yeah, it was totally a lot of fun. And yeah, like I said, it's I think quite liberating in a way.
Wow, those are strong words. Liberating. I like that. It's like it's not because it's interesting, right? When you create your own world, like I created the Haiti verse. It's like a world fueled by like Haitian voodoo and mythology and African like spiritual tradition, and specifically around Haitian history. And that world, it's almost as if it's like there is a little bit of pressure. It's like because I have to kind of adhere to my own canon in a way too,
Exactly.
like not only canon to Haitian history, but also there's a lot of fantasies. There's dinosaurs,
Yep.
there's deities, there are beings in other ways, and but it's like there is a pressure of like, okay, I have to maintain some cohesion because it's a sort of my darling. Like, they say kill your darlings in writing. It's like
Yeah.
be able to have like this really intense like craft like level decision making. But I'm wondering like did you feel the same way, Cameron, for you? Like, because it seems like Tim's looking at it from like, okay, this is not my world, so I can kind of experiment a little bit. But like you sort of were like, okay, no, I see a lot of potential here and I can help world build in that process. Like did you feel the same a little bit, that liberation in a different way?
Yeah, I feel like with Kaylee being more relaxed and Paulette being more detailed allowed me to be the type of person to come in the middle and to see like through my writing, I would go to Kaylee and be like, okay, well, what about this character Nyx? And Kaylee would talk about, well, I don't really have much of a backstory for Nyx. I said, well, what happens if Nyx knew my character from another time ago before, she came to FAIA? And I was like, and Kaylee was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we can go with that. I was like, okay. So then we added more layer to who Nyx was as a character, and we got her more connected. We added a backstory to Nyx, more a specific backstory to Nyx. And this was the same for a lot of other things. Like, we wanted to know how the authorial system, what's the what's what type of police do they have in FAIA? And I came up with the Sentinels, and what kind of weapons that they would carry and stuff like that. And I ran it by Kaylee and Paul, and they were like, okay, yeah. Because sometimes a lot of times when you're building worlds, you don't really think about the nitty-gritty specifics, and sometimes you need another writer. Because I don't when I come up with my worlds, and I have to come up with stuff afterwards as I'm writing. So you might need another writer to come up and be like, well, how is this? And, how give them ideas, and that will fuel more. I feel like for the creators of the world, the concept and the foundations were there. And then as we wrote, we came up with the specifics that end up inspiring us to continue to write and work on FAIA or FAIA. And continue us to envision the world and its dynamics and what happens, the rules of the world we kind of set through our writing. And it was an exciting process to me, it was, because I would go to them all the time and ask them, like, what do you think about this? And they were gung-ho about it. I was like, okay. So I enjoyed it. I did. I really did. And it got me to think more about what kind of person I am as a writer too, and what I'm good at too. And I know I'm really good at specific details when I may not be so much good at creating stuff on the off my hand, but when something's created, I can connect the dots.
I love it. Yeah.
That's true what Cameron says. I mean, we're lately working on the mini episodes of each characters. I'm the type of writer that writes concise and short. But Cameron, he adds detail that enrich the story. So whenever I write action scenes or, for example, expanding more on Lady Melanie's background, he adds, okay, let me see if I can add more details. When I see the detail that I add, the story looks better. But because I'm the concise writer, so Cameron helped fill in the details. So yeah.
I love that. It's almost as if you're saying, it's like, I don't want to use Adam Smith as like an example here. The sort of the capitalist person who talks about the operation line of like there's an order, you're specializing, everyone has a specialization. It's almost as if it's like we each have our own interests, we each have what we're good at in terms of our skill sets as writers, but we're all coming together to kind of mold something, and then we're using our best strength and also our curiosity to engage where we perhaps might lack.
I see it this way. I make the backbones and Cameron adds the skin, the organs, and the muscles.
I love it. I love that.
My
Kaylee,
psychotic side got out.
what'd you say?
My psychotic side got out.
No, they do it there. I think you were writers here, but okay. Katie, what do you think? Any response about what Paulinette said? Do you resonate with that?
Yeah, I guess it was interesting seeing like the overall picture. So because I did kind of a bit of editing on it. So it was interesting then seeing kind of the bits where everyone kind of both within their stories and as like the overall where each kind of thing slotted in. So that was interesting, and it was an interesting challenge to kind of make sure as much as possible from someone who was already on the inside that it was like it turned into a cohesive thing at the end. But it was, you could see that people kind of emphasize different things in their own bits and then as an overall picture. So yeah.
Haley had
It
a
is a
rush
challenge.
on it.
What'd you say?
I would just step in and say it is a bit of a challenge to keep the plot points consistent. I imagine Kaylee did quite a bit of work on that. Because that's, I think, really one of the kind of the main challenges is that like rising tension, keeping that across basically multiple kind of storylines, multiple writers. I think that's definitely one of the challenges to this kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah, Kaylee had to do a lot of Rashomaning through our stories. And that's what I liked about it too. Well, that's what I like about all the Pens Downs is like you always have this main storyline, and then when you add other writers and their characters, it's like their stories are happening at the same time, which connects to the main storyline. And seeing the product of all of us getting together with FAIA and seeing what Kaylee did to connect the dots, I loved it. I was it got my giddy side going, my reader's giddy side going with the story and how it was supposed to turn out and how like I would end here and then we would go to act two. Like we would go to act one, start a certain way, and then start a whole totally different way on act two because we're going by chronological and rather than the same order that we went by the last story because we're trying to see what we're trying to touch those beats where the reader can get a good grasp of what's going on and be impacted by the story and seeing what's the tension. Like Tim said, what was the tension points? What were the stakes? What was it being at risk? When was it a high tension and when is there a low tension? When is there time to rest and when is there time to keep to up the ante on the action? So I liked it. I liked what we did and how it came out afterwards.
Yeah, I feel like you all are sort of predicting my questions because I was gonna move towards the challenges of collaborative world building and writing, and I think you all nailed it in the and like spot on. I think trying to maintain a cohesive because I always feel like the challenge in collaborative writing and collaborative world building, it's like the synthesis of ideas. How do ideas kind of mesh really well? And Kaylee, what was that for you, kind of going in and kind of connecting those dots? Did you feel it like jarring or did you feel it exciting? Like kind of taking on an editorial slash world building sort of role to kind of stitch the product in the end, all these stories? Or did you feel like it naturally flowed in terms of the different acts and then the different main plots and then people writing around those different plot points?
Well, so before I started with that, I probably had more of a sense in my head that it was going to be difficult and I was going to have to go back to people and say, well, can you change this or something? But once I looked at it and, again, like try to be expansive in my own thinking as well. Once I looked at it and kind of saw what was there, yeah, I mean, even to start with, I was quite pleased with how it was working, which I mean, I still did, like it was kind of a bit like a puzzle, putting things together and then thinking, well, maybe just kind of tweak this or that. But yeah, even to start with, it felt, yeah, quite like it quite worked together to me anyway. But again, I think possibly outside eyes will have quite a different idea because I was like really like right in it. So if you're not right in it, maybe I didn't do a good job of, catering for you. We'll see.
The book is coming out on the 28th of May, so we will see the reviews. No, I think it works well because it's almost the multiple POVs. And it's like the multiple POVs, epistolary sort of ways that novels, let's say like George R. R. Martin does. It's like there's a different character, there's things are happening simultaneously, and then each of these characters have a different voice. And I think we do that, like we did that well, Paulinette.
Another example would be the book Dracula, that is written in letter form, but each character has their own diary or letter, which is kind of similar to our story.
100%. Yeah, and I feel like that like format lends itself well to the collaboration, which I feel like we've been able to, because we did a lot of experimenting in Pens Down over the last couple of years of like trying out different ways, like 1 week Pens Down, one session Pens Down, like, and then we ended up with a 3 months Pens Down, and we've done micro and larger ones. That's fascinating. That's really, really cool. Yeah, any questions you guys have for each other of like of the process? Because I feel like this is such a magical process of just coming together, And I know the viewers can go on the FAIA page, syllable.com/FAIA, and you'll find the first video for the pins down session when we're writing on the prompt over the Google Doc. So that's been recorded. But yeah, I think any thoughts, any comments? We're nearing to the end of our interview. I know it felt like it just started. Any thoughts or comments before I have my final questions or reactions from what's been said so far?
I would just
Well,
say, Kaylee, Paulette, right on. All right, that's so go on, Kaylee. Sorry to cut you off like that.
no, thanks, Tim. I was just going to say, question for Tim and Cameron, who's coming up with the world next?
Yeah.
That's the question. I know Cameron has a world, and I also know Tim has a world as well too.
Well, I'm coming up with a new one.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right, so get ready.
I'm
Well,
working on it, so that's all I can say.
Cool,
okay.
cool, man.
But yeah, this has been quite amazing to kind of see the insight process, your insights, just the collaborative world building. One thing I was gonna say before, I feel like one thing we've came up with doing pins down is that there's a world building editing that needs to happen to see how cohesive are all the stories and like are like do they feel like they're happening in the same world and are certain stories closer to others and it's like having that insight I think makes it for a smooth like story and a smooth narrative, especially around collaboration. I personally feel I'm kind of beating the horse there, but I personally feel collaborative writing is the future. What happened between us five, I think more and more writers are going to do that and are going to continue to do that. I think writers have collaborated before, but I feel like that particular world, the fantasy world, the FAIA world, and I know you all presented at SyllableCon last year, which was really brilliant and wonderful, and got some real good nods from the judges. Yeah, any final thoughts before we finish? Or I feel like I should find like a good final thought sort of like question for the World in the Sun podcast. But any final thoughts?
I would say just in the pens down thing, I think there's lots of ways we can experiment around that as well too, with like, maybe like just one situation where 5 different characters in the same exact situation, like I think Paulette was just mentioning, and have, just the same, this situation happening from 5 different viewpoints that are completely alien to each other, kind of lay that out. Anyway, just I think there's a lot of opportunity to experiment with not just the world building, but also the storytelling, and how we want to do that. So I'm definitely really excited about what's up next too as well.
Super. Who wants to go next?
I think creating worlds is a lot similar to creating stories, but when you create worlds, you're not just dealing with genre, you're also just dealing with the diversity of creating a place. And to try to create a world, you also have to gear other people's world and see where they're from and what they're interested in, and to see what will motivate them to come into your world and write and expand on that. So, you know.
Thank you.
Oh, well, like Tim, I'm excited to see where kind of pens down and that whole process goes next. And I'm also excited to see where this world goes next, because I know that Paulinette and Cameron particularly are already off on, what things they can do next, which to me is like the greatest thing that everyone's, or, some of us are still motivated to kind of do more and play more in the world. So I think that's pretty cool.
Super. Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes to. Any final thoughts, Paulinette? You can reserve the rest of your time. That's fine. Well, thank you so much to the creators And I also do want to mention Leanda. She couldn't make it, and I know she was involved earlier in the process with the creation of the world. But thank you to you, Kaylee and Pauline. Hats off as the creators of the world and the showrunners of Pins Down last time. I think this is incredible, like, accomplishment, seriously. And the story and the narrative in the world. I can't wait to see where the world flows and goes. And Cameron and Tim, thank you also to you. And I hope that the viewers will be picking up the Artifact Rebellion, who's coming out on May 28th, 2024. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the World in the Sun podcast.
Just
So
one last thing. Thanks to Fabrice for the godfather of
Yeah,
Syllble,
thank you,
the godfather
Fabrice.
of Pens Down.
Yeah,
All right?
thank you,
So,
Fabrice.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank
All
you
Cool.
so much.
I appreciate the Godfather symbol. Perfect.
That's gonna be your new nickname.
Huh?
That's your new nickname, man.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. And until
All
next
right.
time.
All right. See you.